Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Configuration Console webinar. This presentation is going to last approximately 25 minutes, so please remain muted. And if you have any questions, if you can ask those via the chat on the meeting, and then we'll answer any questions at the end. If there are any questions that we've not had time to answer, all the questions will be added to the frequently asked questions section on the webinar webpage when that's posted on the page there. The Configuration Console was the original way that we built practices through Surgery Connect. We've since developed the Service Delivery Console, but there's still a lot of information and a lot of functions that you can configure separately in the Configuration Console. So during the session today, we're going to have a look at navigating to the Configuration Console. We'll look at the alternative menu options depending on how your practice is built, and also have a walk through each of the options available in the Configuration Console. So when navigating to the Configuration Console, you can either go directly from the single sign-on page and then click on the Configuration Console box, or you could enter the web address for the Configuration Console directly into your browser. If you're already logged in and in the user console, you can also go from the menu within any of the other consoles that will then give you the other consoles that you have access to. So we have the Configuration Console at the top of the menu, which is the three lines just next to your initials at the top of each page. When you arrive at the Configuration Console, you'll see some menus down the left-hand side, which are similar to those that you'll see within the Service Delivery Console. You'll also have a dashboard that will tell you how many users that you have and how many groups set up and how many calendars are currently on the system. This menu you're going to see if you are a Service Delivery Console site. So if all your services are built through the Service Delivery Console, this is the menu that you will see. You may also see this menu. So this would be a Service Delivery Console practice, but also has an external transfer number. So at certain points on their calendar, we're transferring calls to another number, and that would be the trunk section that you will then see within the Configuration Console. If your practice is built solely within the Configuration Console, you may see a dependency viewer down at the bottom as well. You can ignore that now, so that system isn't used any longer. There's also a third menu for practices built solely in the Configuration Console, and you'll have some extra menu options within that particular menu. So you will also have short dials, you'll have playlists, you'll have menus and prompts, and you may see SMS templates, which is part of the integrations within Surgery Connect. So it will depend on how your practice has been built as to which options you will see in the menus, but all of the menus will be accessed through the Configuration Console. So we're going to look at the largest of the menus. So we're going to look at the practices built in the Configuration Console, which will give us all options. So the first option we have is the Services menu. This will be the lines coming into the practice, and it will give you a list of the lines that you already have set up. And if you've set up a call flow for that number, it will usually have a name on there. Any spare numbers will then just show with the number on the services list within the Configuration Console. You can edit those numbers by clicking on the pen icon at the bottom of the little options. And when I click on the edit, it will then allow me to edit the messages that are sent out and the actions from that particular option. So we've got our main number here. So calls into that number will first receive the greeting message, which obviously is played to everybody then that calls into the practice. So they'll receive the welcome prompt telling them which practice they've dialed. It will then move on to the action, and the next action for this particular number is to then look at your main calendar. So looking at the mode switch to look at the main calendar to see if the practice is open or whether there is some other event on that calendar. You'll also have the music on hold here, which is then when you place a call on hold, what the patient will hear. In the users section, you'll have a list of all the users that have been uploaded onto the system. If you're using the service delivery console, obviously you can add new users yourself. If you need to add or remove users using the configuration console, you will need to do that by raising a ticket to the support team. So there's no option to add users through the configuration console. That would need to be done in the service delivery console. But users can also be edited, again, using the pen just at the bottom. And you can search for a particular user by typing their name into the search box at the top and then clicking on search. So it's now got the listings that match Jack here. We've got Ben and my default on the training database. To edit those users, just click on the blue pen down at the bottom as usual. And you will then be given the editing user option with the user selected from the options there. We've got some tabs across the top of the page, and on the general tab, you're going to find obviously the name of the user and their login email address. There's also a PIN number, which is the PIN number for the voicemail for Surgery Connect. So if you need a PIN number to access your voicemail, supervisors will be able to retrieve that through the configuration console in the users section. Supervisors can also reset passwords from here. So normally that would be done via the login screen using the forgotten password link. But if the users can't access their email currently, then supervisors can change that password and just let them know what it is so that they're then able to log in to the telephone system. If we move to the numbers options at the top of my user editing, that will then give me the numbers that are available for the calls to be sent to. You're unlikely to see a realistic number in the work number. That will show an ID of the particular phone that they've logged into within the practice, and that may change from time to time depending on which phone they log into. All users will also have access to the soft phone, which is the browser phone that we supply on the system, and you can then add in personal numbers, so either a mobile or a home number, so that that particular user can then forward their calls to those numbers. You can also select the number that is displayed when that user is making outbound calls. So usually that would be the global or the organization setting, which will then show the surgery contact number whenever they're making an outbound call through Surgery Connect. At the bottom of the screen here, you can also change how long that phone is ringing on different devices. So if you find that your mobile voicemail is picking up the messages through Surgery Connect, you can reduce the amount of time that that system rings your mobile before then diverting to its next action via the call flow. If we move on to the missed call section, I can set what will happen when I miss a call, either when I'm busy or when there is no answer. So you can set out different options for each if you need to. If you click on the drop down, it will then give you the options available. So I could send these calls to either a mailbox, or I could even have it sent through to a different user if I needed to when I'm busy. Same with no answer. So I could select them from the drop down and select what action I want the system to take when I miss a call. On the group section at the top here, I can specify which groups Jack is in as a supervisor. This can also be done through the group section, so I could do that there. And if I'm using the service delivery console, this would then be done through the service delivery console group section by adding Jack as a member to that particular group. On the wrap-up section, the system defaults to a 5-second wrap-up after each call, which will give your team just 5 seconds then of breathing time before the next call comes in. You can increase that wrap if you need to. So Jazz has asked that they'll see a temporary Surgery Connect handset. This is what they get logged into. Why is that? It's because the handset can change in the practice. So it doesn't have a set work number because they may be using different phones within the practice. So it will be a temporary number in the sense that next time they log into a different phone, it will then update the ID on their particular user ID. It will also say temporary next to the soft phone, which is just the way that the system is set up currently. So our wrap time can be changed. However, if they need more time to complete notes on the system after the call, it's recommended that they actually use Do Not Disturb during the call, either via the phone or via the user console. That will then stop the next call coming in and put them into Do Not Disturb until they're ready to take the next call. The user voicemail options can be set again through this configuration console. So if you've set up a voicemail for that particular user, you can set then how long those voicemails stay in the voicemail box and also how many messages are able to be left. You can also set the maximum duration for each message, so you can change how long the patients have to leave that message. With the notifications, we've requested here that Jack is sent an email notification, and the system will try to attach a copy of the voicemail to the email. Sometimes those attachments can be blocked by the NHS firewall, so you will receive an email to tell you that you have a voicemail, but the actual voicemail would then need to be accessed through the single sign-on window through the voicemail box on that sign-on. Finally, we've got integration options here. That would be for an individual user. It says EMIS login here. This will also be the correct for System 1, and whichever integration system you have, the system will then be on the correct clinical database. So I can set what I would like to happen when I use my NHS smart card to log in, and I can set that then so that it logs Jack in automatically on the phone when he uses his smart card through the keyboard. I can also tell the system what to do when Jack takes his NHS card out of the system and logs out of the clinical database. And again, you'll have the same options of either doing it automatically, asking what it wants the user to do, or it can do nothing at all. I can also choose what to do automatically for that particular user when associating their call recordings. So if it's an inbound call, I've got it set to automatically associate that to the patient's record. That will then obviously be available through the integration software on the integration tab. We're going to move on to the extensions next, and these are the physical phones that you have within the practice. Again, you can search for a particular extension or use the edit button down at the bottom to change those extensions. So if we click on the edit button again, I get some tabs across the top when I'm editing the particular extensions. On the general tab, I've got the name of the extension. This is the ID that you'll see changing occasionally for the work number. So this is the ID for that particular phone. And then it has the MAC address that the service team would need if you have any issues. It will also tell you what handset this is, so it's a T21 handset. The customization will be available on the T21s and T27 phones. If I scroll down the screen, I can also change whether I have any missed call notifications on the phone, which will flash the light at the top of the phone if I've missed a call. And I can also change whether the phone will light up when I change my status via the user console. So each time I use the user console to change my status, it will light the screen of my phone, and that as a default is switched on. It will also change the status on the screen of the phone so it matches what you've done on the user console there. On the buttons section, I can actually customize the buttons on the phone itself. So you will have some line keys, which are the buttons at the top of the phone. So this is one of the T21 handsets with the two buttons on the right-hand side. They are normally set as either your Do Not Disturb and Login buttons. Scrolling down the screen will then give me access to the soft keys, which are the 4 buttons just underneath the screen. And again, I can change or set actions for those particular keys. If this handset was a T27 handset, then the reception handsets would be displayed like this. Same format, but obviously you'll have some extra line keys because you've got extra buttons around the screen. So a couple of them are already set as your login and Do Not Disturb, whereas the extra buttons then you can pre-program for that particular user. If I want to program one of the buttons, any of the buttons that are not set, I can change. Obviously, I can change the ones that are set as well, but those are a standard setup that work best for most practices. If I want to change an unset button and add something in there, I can click in the drop down on the customization for the buttons here. That will then give me a list of the options that I have available. So do not disturb and log in are already options on the line buttons on the phones. Switch device and extension don't work on this current system, because all of our calls go through to individual users rather than set extensions. The extensions don't have their own telephone number, so there's no way then to transfer that call through to a specific extension unless there's a user logged in there. I could add on a directory contact to this button, so that would then create a speed dial button for me. And if I click on directory contact, it will add it into the first box and then give me a second box in the customization, so that I can then select the directory contact from the list in the directory. So I can add in either internal or external numbers that are then in the central directory. I could also step in and out of certain groups. So if I wanted to have a button on the phone where they could step into an appointments or reception group to help out with calls, I could set that on the phone here as the group step in and out. And then it gives me a second box again to select which group I then want this to affect. So I can step into the appointments group or reception group. So long as I'm in that group in the background, I can be inactive most of the time and then just step in when I need to take calls for that group. Finally, I could do a calendar override. So if I need to put a no appointments message onto our phone system, that can be programmed into one of the buttons on the phone that's spare. If I select calendar override, it will then ask me which calendar I want to use. It's going to be the main calendar in most points, because that's the one that's actually going to control the messages that go out to the patients on the main number. I can then select the override mode from the list of modes, and we've got our no appointment options here. I can either override that until midnight, until the next calendar event if you have a different morning and afternoon set of appointments, or I can override it until I switch it off, so until it's disabled. Finally, in the menu here, I've got the conference facility, which will allow us to have 3 people in a call at the same time. I can also have the directory search function, and history and status are already added as buttons on the phone. So the status is the details for the phone, and your history is your call history there. If we now move on to ringtones, I could set a separate ringtone for each group, but because we use individual users to receive those calls, they actually receive a whisper that will tell them what the call is about when it comes through to their extension. So there's no need to set individual ringtones then on the extensions themselves. Same with the group priority. So I could prioritize calls coming into that particular phone, but because we use users and everything is controlled through the users, the group priority is actually controlled through the groups section. I can also manage the members for this extension, so I could reduce the number of users that show when you use the manual login button by adding their names to the current users. Again, if you have the integration software, it's going to allow all users to use any phone, so you don't need to manage this list at all. If we move on to the short dials, we have covered this before when we were looking at adding users on the configuration console, but the short dial section is where in the configuration console you would add the extension numbers to either groups or to individual people. And I can create new numbers just by clicking on new short dial at the top. It will then ask me what short dial number it's going to be, so I'll pick the next one in the list, and I can then associate that to either a user or a group from the list then that is selected. So you will see the group and all the users there. If you can't see the short dial option, it will be because your practice is set up in the service delivery console. So this is only one of the options that you'll have if you are in the configuration console only. On our group section, you'll have a list of all the groups that have been set up. And again, that will bring through any groups that you've set up in the service delivery console. I can create new groups here in the configuration console as well, or I can edit these groups whilst I'm in the groups section. Again, we get different options across the top of the page. On the general tab, when I'm setting a new group, I can give it a name here. I can even set an administrator for that particular group that will then receive any messages around that particular group. The call distribution is usually set on longest idle, so it's looking for the person who's been sat waiting longest for the next call. I can also set the group priority down here. So if I go back and actually edit one of our current groups, the appointments group here, you can see that that's set on a medium priority. It will either be high, medium or low, or it may say normal on them now. Most of the groups will be set up on normal or medium priority, apart from your emergency bypass group, which will be set on high priority. That's so that if you have the same group of people answering the calls across all your groups, it will push to the front of any customer queue that you have, so that the emergency bypass is the next call to be answered. On the members tab here, I can specify the members of this particular group, and it will also show me whether they are currently active to take calls within that group. I can also set in our auto step-in members, which we looked at in depth when we looked at the resource management webinar. On the options for the groups, I'm then going to say what the patients will hear. So we've got the whisper prompt, which is actually your staff members listening to that when the call comes through. We can also set a failure prompt, so if there's nobody logged into this group, it can then tell the patient that it couldn't transfer the call through. Reassurance is what the patients will hear whilst they are waiting. So that's going to be their default hold and reassurance and their queue position. You can set the next action for this particular group, and you can set the limit for the call queue. So at the moment we have 100 calls, or you can spend 7,200 seconds within the queue before it fails. The voicemail will set the options for group voicemails. You can set how long these messages are kept for, and again, how many messages are in the voicemail box. You can also set the notifications for that. So if you have your group voicemails, you can either have it sent to every user that's logged in currently in that group. So if a voicemail is left for a group, it will email each user that's currently logged in, or on this one, we've got it set up that missed calls then are notified by the group administrator, which would be the administrator that you set on the general tab. You may also see a queue busting tab. We've covered that in depth in the QBuster webinar, so I'm not going to go through the details now. And the wrap-up codes on here are no longer in use. If we move on to the playlists, this is what your patients are listening to whilst they're actually in a queue. So you can set individual playlists for different queues. And again, we covered this in depth as part of our Informing Your Patients webinar. On the calendars section, you can edit your calendars. The configuration console is the best place to delete any single events of a recurring event on your calendar. So if you need to delete a particular bank holiday so that you can then open, you're better doing that through the configuration console so that it doesn't delete all events under that name. I can set a new calendar here if I need to. I can also delete calendars from the configuration console. So if you've got calendars that are no longer in use and you want to delete them, you can do that from here. If I click on the pen, that will then edit the calendar, and that's covered in detail in the calendars webinar. On the menus, this will be the menus that the patients are hearing during the calls. Again, this is a menu option that you may not see if you're using the service delivery console, because your menus would be added through the Xflow. I can add new menus to our call flow, and if I click on the main menu here, I can say then what this menu is called, so I can rename the menu if I need to, if I'm making it a different option. The prompt is what the system is going to read out to the patient. So this is what's going to tell them which buttons they need to press during that menu. And how many repetitions is the number of times that this will repeat if the patient doesn't make any choice when the menu is first read out. They have 10 seconds in order to make their choice once they've heard those options. And on the button assignment, you will see the actual buttons then that the patient will use on the phone. So we're asking them to press 1 for appointments, 2 for prescriptions, and 3 for general inquiries. Within the button assignment, it's then set up to go to the relevant groups that will then answer those particular calls. On the prompt section here, we will then have the prompts in the background for each of the different areas. So if you're in config only, you'll have a prompts option where you'll need to create each prompt that's going to be read out to a patient. So they can either be within your menus, they can be separate prompts that they will hear as they go through the call flow journey, or they can be for the calendar. So we've got prompts here for the bank holiday, which is telling the patients that you're closed on public bank holidays. You can edit what those prompts say, and you can either upload your own files and record your own messages so that it will play it at this point in the call flow, or you can use the text-to-speech options. On the trunk section, these are the numbers that are diverted to external numbers. So we've got a diversion number here that we're sending calls through to when the practice is closed for training. Again, I can edit those just by clicking on the edit button. I can change the name, which will then change what it says at the top here, the actual number that we send the calls through, and how many calls can go through at the same time. I can also change how long that number will ring out before it then goes through to the next action. The waiting prompt is what the patients are then going to hear whilst they're waiting to go through there. On the directory section, you will get a list of all the numbers that have been added into the central directory. If it's an internal number, you'll get just their name and no delete button. So to delete individual users from the directory, you would need to delete the user themselves. If you delete the user, it will remove them from the directory entry. It will remove them also from the call history log, so you won't have any names next to their call history. So you may be better just moving them to the end of the list and marking them as deleted rather than removing them, so that you can still access call recordings for the 3-year period after they've left. I can add new contacts or bulk upload contacts into the directory, and again, that was covered in full in the central directory webinar. In the SMS templates, this is available with system integration, and this will be the templates then that you can set up through the integration software. You may see on yours that it actually says integrations rather than SMS templates. If so, it means that you'll also have the associations option as well as the templates. So the text templates can be set up from here, but you can also associate the users to their clinical database user ID from here as well. We ask you to go around and do that individually on a user by user basis, just so that it's all matched up and you don't need to worry about knowing the name of the PC that is then matched to that user. On the phone section in the associations, you can associate the phones again to the individual PCs. That's something that you will have done when you first set the system up, and you'll have gone around and paired up each phone with each PC so that you don't need to know the name of that particular PC within the room. And on the services here, it will show you your CBD for your particular practice. And if you need calls to be answered on a different number under a different practice CBD, you can even set that up through the inbound services section. In the global settings, the appointment management, which is also available in the integrations, is not currently in use. So we will be looking at that in the future. In the global settings here, this will set the settings for the practice. So it's looking for the number that's going to be displayed when you make any outbound calls, and the music to play whilst a patient is on hold, if anybody puts a patient on hold there. It's also going to automatically try and attach those voicemails to emails. As we discussed in the users though, if it does get blocked, you'll still receive the email, but then you'll access that email through, voicemail through the single sign-on window. You can also set a list of emails that are used for notifications, so that if the applications are unavailable or if there's any problems with the system, it will notify those particular users. If I scroll down to the integration settings at the bottom, for the practice, I can say what I want the system to do with the clinical database. So when we log in, it's automatically going to log the majority of people on the phones, unless they're already logged in and their users change. Their user settings are different than the global settings. So the user settings would take preference over the global settings there. Okay, so we've had a look at navigating to the configuration console. We've looked at the alternative menu options that you'll have depending on your practice. And we've also had a full configuration console walkthrough in the different options there.